Welcome to Soul Sessions, conversations to inspire your journey through life. I'm your host, Susan Kiskis.
And I'm Jose Johnson.
And I'm Rickie Freedman.
Today's episode is on sound healing, and I'll be introducing our guest in a little bit. But for now, I am so excited about talking about sound healing. And I'm sure Jose also as a musician and Reiki also, right?
And I'm a singer too.
Singer,
so
yeah.
Lots of different aspects that we all bring to this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, music has been an integral part of my life, as I think it is for most people growing up, because there is always either something that we're exposed to in our childhood in our family or just in general through our communities. Jose, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with music in general, and has there been any kind of tidbits growing up that you felt it really showed you the power of healing through sound?
Well, music is just culturally, it's such a huge part of our existence. Ethnic song, you know, so when you think about me growing up in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, so music is a huge part of the worship services, you know, the Negro spirituals, the hymns, and things like that. And with every culture, music is a way of expressing ourselves, the joys, the sorrows, and it's overlooked a lot of times, the power of music, the power that it really has over us, and how it can change your emotions, it can change your direction. Obviously, being a musician as well as in all the other things that I do, there are pivotal points where music makes these huge impressions in your life, and you can always, I think everybody can do this, you can tie some major transition point in your life and you connect it with a song. Mm-hmm. You know, it's something that was on the radio or something that your mom used to sing or it was part of a commercial, but that the music gets into us and it's part of our soul. And I'm really interested in hearing what is going to come out in this conversation today.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I was in a choir for church. And I remember every time we would sing, there was something here that just felt very different and open. You know, I really loved that. And I so badly wanted to play instruments. And I remember taking drum lessons with one of the youth ministers in the basement, and I was horrible. And then I remember taking piano lessons, and eventually that ended. And then I remember trying to learn the guitar, and that ended. And it was just one of those things, you know, of always coming back to the voice. And, you know, later we talk about our guest, she was actually a huge part in me learning about how I could actually use instruments to express that, and then continue to allow that unknown feeling inside of me continue to open and to bloom, which I believe is like what you're talking about, is that power of sound, the power of instruments, whether that's the voice or the piano or a crystal singing bowl. It's something that's always present, that awakens something in us. It's a universal language.
It's vibration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And vibration, there's so many different vibrations, the vibration of love, the vibration of light, but sound is so tangible.
Yes.
You know, because we hear it, we feel it. It's something that crosses even the research that's been done about music and its effect on the brain, and how it makes the brain work in a much more cohesive way than many other activities you can be involved in. So the vibration is so critical to it, and
beyond what we can hear with our own human ears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In Ayurveda, they break down the different doshas into elements. And so there's one dosha called Vata, V-A-T-A, and it is based on air and ether. And the thought is that Vatas are very auditorially stimulated because it is the sound that is in the ether coming into the air, and then you hear it, and that's the first element, you know, like the first transition of the element. Sound comes before anything, right? And then it reminds me of, I think there's a passage in the Bible, right? It's, where it actually says, and then there was the name, right? The word, yeah. And that was like the first thing, which then in a lot of times when you're doing yoga, the sound Om is the sound of everything, the first sound. So.
Yes, and it's way more than singing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sound is one of the ways that spirit communicates with me. I get a lot of information that way. And I have learned that one of the ways that I help with healing even though sometimes it's not in the most appropriate times, is I hum.
No hum.
I told Jose to give me a little nudge if I start to hum, because I do it so subconsciously, but it has become part of the healing vibration that I offer with my work as well.
Well, so interesting is that I know, Susan, you travel all over the world, that, we all speak different languages, but the sounds we make are similar. If it's good, the sounds we make when we're in pain, the sounds that we make when we're happy, when we're content, when we're suffering, all of the sounds are consistent. We may add a level of verbalization by adding a syllable like ah or oh or ouch, but the fundamental sound, the way we produce that sound, where it comes from within us, is the same no matter where you are. So that is such an innate part of the human experience, and I love it. Having been, and still performing professionally to this day, I witness on a regular basis the power that music has, the power that sound has, and it's great to see that people are starting to look at it more as a healing art, as a science, as as something that is much more than just entertainment.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to our conversation that's coming up.
Beautiful.
And speaking of our conversation that's coming up, our presenter for today is Miss Lana Ryder. Lana is a sound therapist and instructor. She's been practicing and teaching in the holistic community for about 23 years, and music and healing ministry for 45 years. So, Lana, welcome to Soul Sessions.
Hi, thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I look forward to sharing with even more people how sound is such a crucial part of our healthy living.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your background that led you to this
This
form
point in
of
my
healing,
life.
right?
Well, I was born into a long line of professional musicians and healers, and my mother was a nurse and also a professional musician. So I grew up from the womb on being very familiar with music and the comfort that it brings, the healing that it brings, the fun that it brings, and the joy that it brings to life. So, and one of my favorite quotes about music and sound in general is from Maya Angelou, where she said that music was her refuge, that she could crawl between the space in the notes and curl her back to loneliness. Because like many people, I didn't have the easiest childhood either. So music was really a healing force for me long before I knew it was actually a healing force. So, and music came easily to me throughout the public school system, and I started out studying clarinet in elementary school, and I wasn't very good at that. And then piano, because my mother was an organist, jazz organist, she tried teaching me. Well, mothers teaching their children is not always the best idea, because I wasn't her best student. And eventually I went on to study voice, and that's the modality, that's the instrument that actually earned me a living. So, and so that's a little bit of my background.
And how did you progress from using voice to sound healing?
Well, I was always interested in holistic health. Because of my mother's background, and I'll add, she had Edgar Cayce books lying around the house and would talk about him. So I knew about energy healing for a long time. And so I had worked in the allopathic medical field for about 25 years before I actually had my first massage. and I saw how massage therapy was very healing for me in many ways. So I went to massage school, and that really gave me a foundation for practicing then as a holistic practitioner and taking what I knew from how I healed my own childhood wounds and so forth into a practical platform to share that with others. And then as I started thinking about music and sound, like, you know, we hear all that pretty music playing in the background when we get massage. And I knew that was relaxing, and I knew about entrainment and how it would slow down the heartbeat and so forth. But I thought, I wonder if there's more. I wonder if there's more that music can do. So I went to become a practitioner, a massage therapist with WellSpan Health's Center for Mind Body Health, and they were just getting started then. We hadn't quite gotten it off the ground. And at one of our meetings, our staff meetings, Dr. Ed Rogers, who was the medical director then of that office, he said that we were going to bring in Dr. Mitch Gaynor to speak for the opening of the center. And he would speak not only to staff and but also the public. So those two workshops that I went to, I was in heaven. He did a simple little crystal bowl meditation, and I sat there in that auditorium and I was just transported to
I can feel it
transported to and I thought, oh, this is it. This is the answer. So from there, I started studying and trying to find out all that I could about sound healing. And of course, his book, The Healing Power of Sound, was the first book that I got and read. And with him being an oncologist at Strang Cancer Center, he taught his patients how to use sound for healing. And in that book, he documents a lot of the cases about the miracles that happen. So that it's been one step after another to get into the sound more full time and to integrate that in my practice. And now I really do that full time, the sound therapy.
Yeah, and you've created programs, ReikiSound and ReikiVoice, both of which I've had the blessing of taking with you.
Yeah. And Susan did sound therapy course.
Yeah,
too.
that was, for me, that was really life-changing, because again, as I was saying, that you guys, unable to play the piano, the drums, the guitar, and then it was taking a look at a Tibetan singing bowl or a crystal singing bowl going, well, this I could do, you know? And then, of course, it takes still a lot of practice, but to be able to feel like that sense of accomplishment that an object that creates sound is not something that I will never be able to create a relationship with. Do you know what I mean? That I'll be able to use this tool. And I have to say it's because of that confidence that you instilled in being able to use gongs and the singing bowls and drums. Because I've even taken workshops with Ubaka Hill, who's like an international renowned djembe teacher and player. Is that I'm now able to, when I decided to pick up a harmonium, because that was one of my desires, it just clicked. And I think that something shifted in my relationship with instruments or something like that, because I had no problems like starting that journey with that instrument. And then now I collect, and I would always be an avid collector of instruments, so now I'm constantly collecting them, and I'm no longer afraid of them and worry about whether I'm going to be good or bad, because I know that there's something that can be used from that. So yeah, so for me personally, the lessons that you were able to impart for me were just very life-changing.
And I remember hearing your voice. That blew me away in that class.
Thank you.
I was just like, wow, I hope you're using your voice more. So.
And it's not just about being able to sing pretty. It's about using your voice as an instrument for vibrational healing, which isn't always pretty notes. It's the notes that respond to the vibration that the person needs to feel and hear.
Well, and then we get into the whole thing of preference and cultural influences,
Right.
because
What we
some of the
define.
things, when we first hear people from maybe India or China, and they're singing, and we're used to, and this gets into the whole thing of the type of music, I can't think of the right word now, but anyway, so we may hear, oh my, that, if we're not used to that.
Right.
But when you are, first of all, more open-hearted,
Yeah.
and you become, for me, music and sound have really stripped away a lot of the critical element and the judgment, so that there's no such thing as someone who cannot sing.
Right.
So when I hear these different notes, and the notes that we've written out of our Western scale, we do C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and basically the 12-note Western scale. But when you learn that there are lots of other notes in between those notes, okay, then you start listening to music a little differently, and you start understanding and accepting those other cultural preferences and differences that you might think, oh, they're singing off key, and no, they're not. And maybe you need that note.
Right. Sometimes the notes that feel or sound dissonant to us are helping to stir up what we need to have healed.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. And in sound therapy, dissonance plays a real helpful role, because if you play two notes right next to each other, the dissonance is what breaks up. It helps to disperse blocked energy, and even releasing psychological blocks and so forth. So, but that's a whole other lesson.
Wow. Oh, I was gonna say, wow, this could go down so many
know.
different rabbit
I know.
because it's like, wow, we can really get into like music theory and ethnomusicology and all that sort of stuff, or we could get into things like, binaural beats and entrainment and things like that. And I mean, it's really amazing. And maybe this is, I already say, let's set it up for another discussion.
Yeah,
some
I
other
know. I'm
time.
thinking the same thing.
But what you were saying, actually going back earlier when you were talking about Maya Angelou, and then what you said about the what we would term microtonal music that exists from other cultures. It's almost like the Western culture, for all of its greatness, does like to categorize things and put them in a very rigid box, and anything that doesn't exist within that box doesn't exist. Until now, we started to get into the realm of quantum physics and things like that, and it's almost like microtonal music. Those pitches that don't exist in our Western diatonic modality, that it's the space between
I love that.
what we know and what we don't know. And the smaller those increments are, I know personally as a musician, the hardest thing in the world as a Western musician is to intentionally play out of tune based on our ear. And I got turned on to Indian music in the 70s. Great jazz trumpeter Don Ellis started to experiment with odd times and quarter tone writing, and it sounded so dissonant at first, and I started to listen to it and go, wow, that's a very unique and complex harmony. And it was finding the space within the space. And when you're working with these kind of concepts, I mean, do you see that as kind of a bridge from the known to the unknown by using these more exotic
Well,
sounds?
yes, and because you have the harmonics, which is what really is most healing for us, okay? And by harmonics, for those who don't know, it's like the notes, between the notes, the notes that above the notes. When you strike a bowl and you hear one dominant sound, but as you start listening, you will hear other notes in there. And so it's a way to explain to people, especially in the sound classes, or explaining to people who just come to me for private sessions or in the group meditations, that things aren't always what they seem to be. Things aren't always what you think you're hearing. There's more there. And I think for me, as somebody who always wanted to make the world a better place, Sound and Music was just the perfect start, because it's an easy way to explain to people things are not black and white. There's a lot going on that we don't see, maybe don't feel, don't observe. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It's beautiful.
But yeah, so it is a way to perhaps help the whole world.
Yeah, build compassion and build bridges and
see.
more inclusiveness. I love that.
Inclusiveness,
Yes.
that's
And it's
perfect.
really interesting because as you were talking, at one point, the bowl started to ring because you hear resonant frequency
I hit
with
that.
it.
Yeah.
And it's just, okay. So when we think about like the way music affects us, it's that resonant frequency, that resonant harmonic that occurs, that it starts to reverberate
Tunes
through
us.
all of us.
Yeah.
And the idea of entrainment, that we're all going to try and swing into that frequency, that beat that's created. So this is really cool
And we
stuff.
do that with each other, which is so beautiful.
Well, and if I would recommend, if there's one thing I could recommend to everybody right now, is there's so much out there on the internet, and yes, please don't believe it all, even with sound therapy, because there's a lot out there that there are a lot of myths, and that's a whole other show. But if there's one video that you could watch, and I think you've seen this because of the last sound class that you had, I recommended Dr. Bruce Lipton on sound healing, the interview that he has. He explains how we came from Newtonian physics to quantum physics, and how even when we were finally able to take apart the atom and see the protons and the neutrons and so forth, and then when they tried to take them apart, there's this energy within them, and we couldn't see it, but we knew it was there because of the force that we could detect. So if you listen, if you're more science-based, or you need that, we have it now with the sound therapy. Of course, 5,000 years ago, they knew it worked because they could see it, right, and they saw the results. But in this particular interview, he gives as a biophysicist, he explains how sound works right down to that atomic level, molecular level.
That's one of the things I really love about you. I love a lot of things about you. But as a teacher, is that you are very science-based with what you offer and you share. And not only that, you are willing to adapt and adjust what you think you knew, or what everyone thought they knew, and share it in a new way based on the science that's catching up. Yeah.
Well, that's important. I think that we all need to be that way, that we're always growing and learning. And where we were at one particular point in our lives, and we knew that we knew that we knew that, and then 3 years later, oh, okay, well, I didn't know that then. And one of my favorite sound therapy teachers, Alexander Tanous, Tannous, he says a lot, we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
So if something comes down the pike and somebody says, well, if you touch this bowl, it'll elevate you into the 8th dimension immediately. Well, most of us are going to go, okay, well, maybe. So we don't know what we don't know, and maybe it will, and maybe it won't, because now anybody can say anything.
Right.
Okay? But we do know what we do know at this point in time, not only as humans on the planet, but as individuals. And I like to say to my students, when you know in your knower that something works, then it works. Because then you get into, and I don't want to start chasing rabbits, intention is important, intention with not only the person giving the sound therapy, but the person receiving. You must have that compliance. And but the other thing is that when you know more, you teach more, and you share more. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to get caught up in the science of it, and science has not caught up with what we know also. And that being said, we don't use that for an excuse then to just say, well, if you touch this bowl, you'll be ascended into the 8th dimension right away. Okay? There's common sense, and there's love, and there's non-judgment, and respect for there may be somebody who does that, and it will happen. Okay? But I think as teachers, we need to certainly be accountable and responsible for the information.
Yeah, and you bring, your willingness to constantly learn, take classes, study constantly, but also you use this, both in your healing work and in your personal life on a daily basis, so your own practical experience as well.
Well, I just want to go back to the thing about how we're created and so forth, and right down to the atoms within all of our molecules, is that how sound healing works, in case anybody out there wants to know. Sound, is energy. Everything is energy. We all know that now, okay? So sound healing is an energy code being sent with resonant or vibrational information that touches that atom, that molecule, and in turn that cell, that organ, that system, our energy field, to help bring it up or down to where it needs to be, which is entrainment, which, Jose, you mentioned entrainment a little while ago. So, and that is how it works. And it isn't New Age woo anymore. No. It never was. We just, didn't have the technology to maybe prove that. So.
Well, it's interesting because there's so much that has been part of our cultural evolution that is true, and we know it to be true through experience. A lot of times it's shrouded by mysticism, it's shrouded by, I don't want to use, I'm trying not to use the word ignorance, but the things that we didn't know in the past. We weren't able to explain certain things. So, somebody always comes up with an explanation, and a lot of times it's just, I'll pull this out and here you go. Yeah. But the science is giving clarity to the whys things work.
Yes.
We know that it works because universally and throughout history, healing has been done through touch, through sound, and then when those didn't work, then through the ingestion of herbs, so our nutrition, our diet, and things like that. So those three, the touch and sound though have been part of our healing process for so long, and it's nice to see that being somewhat of a geek myself, a science geek, that science is coming up with explanations, because I can think something works and I can sort of believe it works, but then when I have something to validate it, then it just gives me that much more confidence. One of my teachers always told me, he's like, if you want to get health or healing, there are three things you have to do, no matter what it is, whether it's going to an acupuncturist or going to Reiki or sound therapy or going to the doctor, to a surgeon. The first thing is you have to believe whatever it is going to help you. the second thing is you have to do it.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is don't do anything to screw it up.
That's great.
But that first part, that believe that it's going to help you, and the intention, like you were saying, the intention, if the intention from the practitioner is positive, and the person is receptive, then there's the potential for so much growth and so much healing. So when you're doing a session for someone, do you find that you have to often break through that barrier of I don't know if this is going to work for me, and if you do, how do you go about that?
Well, before I answer that, I mean, the placebo effect is very effective, okay? And that is also why we're not really sure, those of us who are looking at the science of frequencies and magical frequencies, is this, you know, a 580 or 432 more powerful than 440 or, okay? Because that intention, as you mentioned earlier, Rickie, has a lot to do with it as well. So, what I explain to people is when they ask me about sound therapy, I'll say, well, you know, everything is energy. So even if they are very well aware of that and know that, it helps to start with that foundational belief, because you know what we believe has a lot to do with how we are going to be. So they understand that sound is energy, and I ask them to be open to receiving whatever it is the sound has for them, whatever frequencies come through. And most people, honestly, who come to me, they're already there. They're ready. I even put that out there when I give classes. You know, don't let anyone come who's not ready for this. You know, and it works. It works every time. So I don't really have to explain that to anyone who's already there, either in a group sound meditation or privately. Once in a while, though, you know, someone will question, or sometimes it's, well, I'm thinking of something that happened from a physician, allopathic physician, and he just said, I don't care, it's still nonsense. I don't care how much science you show me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how do I answer that in grace and love and a bridge, rather than put up that wall and just say, well, you're wrong. And so it was real simple, though. It was just like, well, you know, look at it this way. How about if I say to you, well, I'm not taking that pill you prescribed because I don't care if the science is behind it, it's not going to work. If I had that mindset, but yet you had 100 patients who took that and it worked. So I'm saying to you the same thing. I have 100 clients who it worked. I can give you example after example. I can show you the ganglion I had on my foot where I used the tuning fork to actually dissipate that. Okay, I didn't do the Bible thump where you know, try to smash it down. So, you know, and I took pictures of it. I documented it from week 1 through week 2 and how it went away. I have been, incidentally, I was at 2 different physicians, and one they actually took an x-ray. Now that's more soft tissue issue, right. But, and you know, it still showed what was there. You know, you can see it a little bit on that x-ray, what was the swelling that was there and how it had gone. So through the tuning fork. Was it a magical frequency I used in the tuning fork? Okay, I basically used one frequency, but a couple times it wasn't handy, so I grabbed a different one. I also used my voice, directing voice right into it, and I used some Reiki. So, you know, it worked. And the one doctor I went to, the orthopedist, I said, I know you probably think this is weird, but please let me explain this to you. And then I showed him the pictures that I took. And at the end of our appointment, he goes, if it works, it works. And I thought, oh, yay, that's a great attitude, rather than the other physician I was talking to, yeah.
We stay open to the possibility. And if somebody's not open to it, you can't force it on them. You know, it's the same with Reiki or anything else. You just bless them on their path and trust that they'll come to it if and when they're ready. Yeah.
So you mentioned tuning forks, and we obviously have this beautiful crystal singing bowl here. What are some other instruments that you have found people using for sound healing, or that you yourself use?
Oh, there are really many. Right now, the most popular ones that you'll see them everywhere are the crystal bowls and the metal bowls. I call them metal because people, they know them as Tibetan bowls, but me being me and trying to always get things right is because they're not just, you know, from Tibet. They're from the Himalayan area, you know, China, India. We manufacture them here in this country and around the world. So I just call them metal bowls, okay? And you have didgeridoo, which I love. I have not mastered that circular breathing, but it's a phenomenal healing instrument. Of course, the tuning forks, the harp. I have a reverie harp. It's almost like a lap harp, yeah, and it kind of has a droning to it when you strum it. A lot of music therapists use that type of instrument because it's portable. The patients can hold it, you know, in the bed, and they're making music even if they're not a musician.
And you could lay it right on someone's body and play it right on them. It's so beautiful.
It really is. And of course you have the tingshas and chimes and bells and the flute, guitar, gongs, whatever. We could go on and on with the list, but those are probably the most common ones. And my favorite is the voice. Yes. To me, it's the most powerful healing instrument that there is. We take it with us everywhere, and it's always, when we're connected with our heart and our soul, that sound that comes forth connects and washes over people in a way like no other instrument does. We connect with each other, with our voices.
So someone that wants to start sound healing and they want to start off with using their voice, what kind of sounds do you usually teach people to make? Is it more primal? Is it more just oohs?
Well, when I first started giving public workshops about 20 years ago, an easy exercise was to do the toning. Everybody was comfortable with that, and they still are, because we, like as I referred to earlier, you know, we make sounds. We go you know, no matter, you know, where we're from, or ooh, or, whatever. So we do that, and it doesn't have to sound pretty. So I would teach the ooh, ah, ee, and that's just simply ooh, ah, ee, which is like Om, only a little more extended, which is thought to be the original sound of creation in the universes. So I would say doing that for themselves, they can line that up with their chakras, the ooh, ah, ee, and down through their field, and do it several times. If you're a practitioner and you want to start with some sound therapy, but you have no training, and please, don't just copy the internet. There really is a lot to learn that's important in sound therapy. And we can mimic being a sound therapist. And if you're going to use sound in your practice, okay, but then don't call yourself a sound therapist. Therapy is more involved than just making sound with some instruments. So like Rickie uses the I was on the table one time getting a Reiki session, and she was doing some humming, and I was just like, I hope you're doing that in all your sessions, because it was so soothing, so calming, so restorative. So the and just putting hands on someone, you know, With your intention being for their highest good, for their healing, for more love. The is very easy and effective. Or ah.
So you talked a little bit about how you've used physical healing on your own body. And I know that you do this, so can you share a little bit about how you use sound and voice to help with your own stress management in your daily life?
Every morning in the shower, I do this, and I tell my students to do this because it's so simple. You're already stuck in the shower for a few minutes. You might as well, double the benefit. So I stand there, feet apart like shoulder length, and my hands at my side like this, and I do the and while I'm doing that, I'm envisioning and knowing that every little cell in my body is being restored to its most healthy frequency. And every drop of water that falls on me, that golden shimmering drops of water, contain all the frequencies of healing that I most need for that day. And Reiki does come into it. It's Reiki. It's Reiki too. I tell my students on the the walls when you're taking the shower how they get steamed up. Draw your Reiki symbols. Then you're surrounded by them, and they're all coming in, and whoever is next in the shower gets them too. So,
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that is one. And at night, if I'm having trouble sleeping, you can lie on your side and do the he, 3 or 4 times. And again, you set your intention that you're releasing and restoring so that your mind and body can be at total rest through the night. And you believe it, you don't hope. Just like when you pray, you don't hope and you don't beg. You say, thank you, thy will be done. So.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah, I know we were all still feeling this.
So maybe one of the things that you could do to end the show, I think you were thinking, Rickie, is to kind of
Just lead us in a simple sound healing practice that we can all incorporate into our daily lives. And hopefully you'll join along with us.
Okay. Let's just do the ooh, ah, ee, And if it doesn't come out in that order or it's some other sound, that's okay too, because the important thing is, at least for this show, is that we're all doing this together, because then you have the collective consciousness and the effect of all of us together. There is the power of one, but there's also the power of 4 or 8 and so forth, which is it is exponential. That's right. Okay, so let's do ooh, ah, ee, And if you're familiar with that song, Chain Gang, that's the sound of the men. Okay, ooh, ah. That'll get you started, and then ee, okay? Association is a great thing. Okay, so envision that sound opening up, starting in your root chakra and just coming up through. You can do the hand motions if you like. You don't need to. Okay, and let's do that 3 times. Don't be shy. It's not about sounding pretty. It's just your beautiful sound of voice on breath. Ooh, ah, ee, Ooh, ah, ee, And one more time. Ooh, ah, ee,
would you play the bowl for us before we go? Thank you, Lana. So it is.
Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Soul Sessions. I hope you continue the journey with us during our next episode.